my brother asked for what a man of integrity looks like. And I feel like from that, I was able to choose to be the wife of a man who walked much like him.
Hello, welcome to the last segment of Legacy 3 in for this season. I'm so glad that you joined us this evening, and I have the pleasure of talking with my daughter again, who is the visionary of this great podcast. Hello, Jawana. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for asking, Mom.
And thank you for this opportunity again for having this talk that you and I share so often together in a different setting. I'd like to talk to you about some things that you have dealt with and just some new things to share with our viewing audience today and a few questions. I'd like to begin by saying, how did your childhood experiences shape your perspective in resilience and perseverance for this season that we're in now?
As you were speaking, we haven't actually looked. It's so amazing that you would say that at what we wanted to put as a title for this segment. And I was thinking a legacy of resilience as it pertains to living and my life and where I currently am. I would say my childhood experiences were affected, say my childhood experiences that affected where I am today probably would be more surrounded by the idea. I won't say lack, because you always provided. Grandmother was there as well, always provided. So we always had. But there was always that feeling of what we always talk about, the desire for more. The desire for more than what my grandmother had, in the investments that were made in me, the desire for more than I watched you have as a wife, as a mother, as a minister. And that concept of legacy, I feel like, was always embedded based on where we came from. And so my theory is that with each generation, things should get better. And as long as you can look at generations past and look at where you are and you see progression, then the idea of legacy is truly being embraced. And so I feel with this season that I'm in and this era of legacy where I've become very passionate about legacy and leaving a legacy of faith, leaving a legacy of prayer, a legacy of strength, a legacy of knowledge, a legacy of education, whatever it is that you're passionate about, your former years should shape that. So there we have it. In one of the earlier podcasts, we talked with my daughter, Kiana. So there's 3 generations of us. And we talked about my grandmother going from a 3rd grade education to you with 1 degree, me to 2 degrees. Now my daughter's on her 3rd degree at 22 years old. That's legacy. Why did I use that as we talk about resilience? I always looked at the sacrifices you made. I always looked at the sacrifices Granny made. And it was very important to me to not only be able to pass sacrificial love on, but it's very important to me for you to have a return on your investment. So one would say, but she's her daughter. She did things that she was supposed to do. No, there were sacrifices that were made where we had when you didn't. So when I think about why I've been resilient and what impacted my resilience, it's where I came from. It's where I came from, what I wanted to look like at 30 years old, you were going through a painful divorce. At 30 years old, I was 9 years into a marriage and getting ready to have my first child. So my experience is wanting to make you all proud, make you all have you all live long enough to see a return on your investment, a return on the strength that you passed on to me, a return on the lessons that were taught by you all. That's how my childhood shaped the resilience and the person that I became.
Thank you for that, because in life there are so many adversities and things that we face, and if we give in to those and just accept it as a way of life, we would never be overcomers. And I thank God that you are an overcomer and did not allow the things that could have hindered your life from becoming a prosperous life where you can, in this season, live in the favor of God and live in the overflow of His blessings, because you are an overcomer and you were able to overcome some of the challenges that you faced, and you overcame them even with limited resources, and coming up with no relationship with your father, because by the time you were here, things went south or went out of control, which caused you to be fatherless as far as the physical feature in the home. But what is it? What is it that actually motivated you to pursue a higher education or to go to the greater things in God, uh, without being pushed? You watched me struggle. You didn't take on those struggles, but somewhere you must have said, I can do better than this. Tell us about it.
I do believe that there are certain things that are innate, and progression is very important to me. I am not one that's happy if I feel like life isn't changing, life isn't moving. Sometimes you need to go in a different direction. Being stagnant has never been an option for me. I got a master's degree in 1 year, the year that the Olympics was in Atlanta, 1996. I got a master's in 1 year because rather than procrastinate or prolong the process, which I'd already applied, they had a 1 year program. So for me, that was a challenge. And I've always been one that's up for a challenge. And, some people were born with this innate ability to move, to progress, to fight. So the only thing that actually slowed me down was when I had children, because I wanted to give them the best parts of me before they got older. Even in my career, that slowed me down. But there was just, first of all, I came from a mother who was educated, because without your education, what would life have been like for Tim and I? So there were certain parts of me that was innate biologically, but as well, I've just always been one for progression. We don't have to do things like we've always done. If the world tell you you can't do it, prove them to you that you can. If that's what your dream is, or if that's what your desire is, and you may be knocked down before you can get up and get it going. But take some time. Don't live in regret and shame, and make it happen. So I've been a driven person, and driven not by the dollar, but just by that innate satisfaction of when I think about Sarah Jake's book Power Moves, that's such an empowering book. That's who I would be, and the greatest leaders are the ones who can demonstrate to you how they've overcome obstacles, that were placed in their view that could have stopped them from reaching a goal or becoming great. That's why you often hear me say to the people who are under my leadership, it's never too late to be great. It's not. Life will tell you it is. But I always had that drive. And so I think the greatest thing that I've had to deal with is people wouldn't know this side of me, but the innate feeling of fear sometimes when I'm stepping into a not so familiar terrain, because I like to have a plan. I like to know what it looks like from point A to B. I'm very structured. So when I am put in situations or I'm given a vision that's not very defined and I have to rely on my faith, that's when I struggle. But the older I got, I was able to look past my fear, and tap into my faith.
Well, I know that I was the best role model that I could be as your mother, but rearing a son and a daughter, there were just areas that I couldn't role model for him, but there were some basic things in life that I could role model for both of you to walk in integrity and to, you know, uh, be respectful, and rebelliousness was not accepted in my home. And so I had to uh, learn how to navigate so that I didn't lead you all down the wrong path, but to lead you down the path of righteousness for his name's sake. So even with my being there, I could not do it by myself. I could not do it depending on my mother, because my mother's ideas and the way her thought pattern were not like mine. And I knew that putting my life on hold so that you and your brother would not be dysfunctional in this society, that I needed somebody else to help. Actually, who were some of the key role models who inspired your life as you navigated through your formative years? Because I was very protective of who I would allow you to go visit or who could come visit you. I never allowed you all to have the spend the night overnight in places that were unfamiliar to me and you. I knew where you were, so it was only with family, and they were choice family members. So I knew how to do that. But who were some of the role models that inspired your life?
Our village was so small and tight that I would have to say definitely you and Granny, but my aunts, even my uncles, because for the absentee father, I had uncles that always made me feel loved and made me feel a part, or, I had that strong vision of family men from my uncles. I would say definitely my aunts, who were such women of strength and wisdom and resilience. The two of them, you, Granny, my uncles, my brother, who acted as an absentee father even when it was unwanted. But he is such a man of integrity. He is such a man, and it only a sister who grew up close to you and who have watched your conversation and the things that you participated in could say that, and I could say it with the utmost respect for him and the life that he led, that I know was so difficult at times when you've been chosen and you seem and feel so different from your peers and your family members. But definitely my brother, as for what a man of integrity looks like. And I feel like from that I was able to choose to be the wife of a man who walked much like him. So I would say my brother. And along the way, there were educators. I remember my undergrad year, I took a course that was so difficult. And the female, I can't even remember her name, who taught the class, she was a great instructor, but I struggled, and which was difficult for me because, of course, I didn't normally struggle in school. And I struggled to the extent that to the very last hour of the class, at the time I was taking the exam, she I told her after the exam I needed a certain grade to pass the class, which I could not get my degree if I didn't pass that class. And I told her as I was leaving that day, I said, I don't think I'm gonna get the grade. I struggled. And she, with a very stern face, told me, okay. Fast forward, I know I did not pass that exam, beyond a shadow of a doubt. But when I contacted her, she simply said, you're okay. So one would say, how is that a role model when you don't even remember her name? It was a role model for me to the type of person that I wanted to be, because there are not very many people out there like that care or that sees your effort and don't judge you by what you're doing right now, but by what they've seen and what they know. Because there's nothing like people who have known you for your entire life, and one mistake, we see this on social media and we see this on world platforms all the time. You can go the right way for 99% of your life, but it's something about the nature of people and the lack of integrity and the lack of kindness now that they will forget everything you did in that 99%, and they will grab a hold of and run with that 1%. And so for role models like that I had here and there, and she was an African American instructor, which really added to my esteem for who I am. I've had role models along the way that reminded me that there are still good people. And so it has driven me to want to, no matter what's being said or done, want to be that kind of representative, not just in the kingdom, but in the life that we're living, based on how people view life and how people view integrity and character.
I hear you, and my mind goes back to the importance of having your children in a structured environment, having them in Sunday school and church activities so that you can shape and mold lives, because this is where you find people of strength that can help. And even my mind goes back to the fact that I was not a swimmer. So, and I was overprotective of you all. But today you are a swimmer. Why and how? Because you were in the youth group at church, and the youth leader who could not swim took the time, one by one, holding you all in the water and teaching you to do what she couldn't do. Now, that's what I call a real role model. And as the grandchildren came along, I sat on the sideline fearful that they would drown because of my lack of what I needed. But this is what the things that pay off for your children, choosing them or having them in a place that people can do for them in a positive way that you can't do for them yourself.
And may I add to that, because I sort of went left with the conversation and added to the question you asked prior. That was the last role models that I wanted to address, the our faith leaders, Bishop and Doris Spires, and growing up under their ministry was life changing. And you don't recognize that until you look at where the church is today. You don't recognize what good leaders really are until you look at the universal church and where it is today. They looked at, which has shaped my view also of looking at the whole child, and the way they, for the viewing audience, we attended a black church, but our leaders were Caucasian. And to look at the love and the sharing that they demonstrated the unconditional love and the reaching even behind the scenes and the things that they were willing to help expose us to even at times that they didn't have children. That has impacted my walk as well when my husband and I were youth leaders and we would get kudos all the time about the way in which we gave, but it was easy to do when you've been given that type of love and respect and concern from people as you were coming along. So they were definitely part of the village that helped to shape who I am.
Thank you. And actually, that leads me to the next question. We talk about the village, but I remember even when you received your master's degree, I remember saying to you, it was hard to rejoice with that master's degree that you had without rejoicing about the man who was in your life. Because Keith made so many sacrifices as you pursued your education. He didn't come home from work and sit at home in the evening waiting on you to come home to prepare meals and be the wife that you should have been. He would cook for himself and he did things to take it off of you. He was just super support. So, how did your husband and your children contribute to your journey, and what role did they play in your success?
Keith has been a godsend in every sense of the word, but the children came after being conferred my degrees. They came after, but he contributed because he's ride or die. You know, you want to do it, let's do it. You want to try it, okay? Can't do anything but try it. And he has all his mother was the same way, and he is indeed her child. But he has just always been ride or die, and so that makes it easy when you're sharing finances, when you're in a committed relationship to have each other's back like that. So he's just such a supportive person and always have been when it comes to goals or dreams or visions, always. And I couldn't ask for any more with for that type of support. As for my children, I would say for them, their contribution to my success or feeling confident in where I am now has been more with the ministry side because they're like their dad in that sense. But we've been a team, even with Kiana being away in medical school. We still are a team. She's still doing whatever her hands can do to help build ministry. And I remember getting a prophecy, a prophetic word from a man of God when visiting another church years ago. And little did he know that one of our young people was actually living with us at the time for some difficulties she had been having at home and just trying to figure life out when she was crossing over from those teenage years. And she was there in that service. And when he prophesied to me, he said, I know you're too young for this, but God said he's calling you to be a mother of Zion. And he went into what mothers in Zion were and how they love and how they nurtured and how they have been called to teach younger women. And I looked over at her because his next words were, you, God said you were going to open your home many times for people. And he said, are you married? And I said, yes. He said, well, God said to tell you that your husband and your children will always be okay when you have to share your love or share your home with somebody else. And by that time, I was looking at the young lady who's still so dear to me today. She's a daughter. And she was crying because nobody knew that. Nobody in the ministry even knew she was staying with us to that extent. So I use that as an example as to what the children have meant and how they contributed. They have been partners in ministry. They have invested their finances because they've both been working. They have invested their time. They have done consistently in ministry what others would get some kind of donation for without fail, without asking, without expecting. They have gone with me. If I'm going to be gone late, 9 times out of 10, they were with me. They weren't sitting at home complaining that their mother was never there. We did it together. And so that's why it's so easy for me to walk the journey, not just because walk the journey with them, and not just because I am their mom, but because this is just what we do. So when God blessed us with children, He knew what it would take, and He knew how He would form them so that we would have this connection, such that it hasn't been their love and their support. They're just like their dad, you know. Okay, we have to do it. Okay, what's the plan? What do we need to do to get it done? It's always been that way. So they were just God. All of them were God sends as it pertains to my success in anything I'm doing. You know, I mentor now. Kiana's right there along with me. We mentor women. So, you know, it's amazing to know that when God ordains something, he sets everything in place that needs to be there for you to be successful at doing what He's called you to do.
And I hear you because I guess somewhat being from the old school and the way I was taught, there were errors in uh, rearing children where I was not good at it because I didn't know any better. But when you know to do better, you do better. When you all came up, I didn't know how to balance uh, the life around us so that I didn't have strength in this area and the next area was so weak until you couldn't survive. So balance is so important. And that's the one thing that I can say that I noticed about you and Keith and the rearing of your children. You allowed them to have a balanced life. Church was important, but so was other areas of their lives where I made church the primary thing. And so many pastors, so many people in ministry make this mistake to the extent that their children grow up and they are dysfunction and they don't want any church anymore. They want to try life and see what life is all about. But if that balance is there, what you train them up the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart. Thank God that I did train you all up in a way that you did not depart. But some of the things that I did not teach because of the lack of being open and having putting making sure that everything was balanced out. It could have been the other way, but God knew the heart.
Yeah, and that's, I think, in one of the previous segments, that's what Tim and I talked about, is that scripture, a false weight is abomination before the Lord, but a just weight is His delight. And so we would, even as youth leaders, we shared that because so many times you find children on the other end that don't see the importance of spiritual balance to everything else that you're doing. So yeah, that scripture has stood out while raising kids.